Welcome, everyone. Glad you're here tonight. We have a great speaker. I'm happy to see everybody out. Our guest speaker is someone who has spent his entire career just looking over the horizon, as he says. Rishad Tobaccowala as a long-time top executive at Publicis Group. And if you don't know Publicis Group, it's one of the world's largest advertising, marketing, and data transformation firms. They have now over 100,000 employees around the world. And Rishad is one of their more senior executives. And he spent time consulting with some of their largest clients around, the largest global clients around the world. So very impressive experience. He has spent his career really talking about how to navigate startling change, which is what I think he's experiencing today. In a world dominated by AI and data collection, the message that he has is very grounded. He is going to talk about his book, Restoring the Soul of Business. He is talking about the competitive advantage of the organization. It's not necessarily technology, but it's humanity. He teaches leaders how to strike the necessary balance between digital tools and analog people. We'll note that we're not using any slides tonight because he wants us to be a conversation about these topics. So welcome, Rishad. Thank you very much for coming.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for coming on a Sunday evening. So what I'm going to basically do is we have 45 minutes. It's exactly 5:30. So I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes. And then I'm going to open it up to either questions or brickbats for the next 20 minutes. Or you'll like to say, we don't need to have any questions, let us go drink. Or whatever needs to be done. So have my background. And I'm going to speak about 4 different topics. And somewhere along, I'm going to talk about a little bit about a couple of things that I think everybody, whether you're 0 years old or 100 years old, needs to keep in mind as we speak. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what are the 5 big things that everyone should keep in mind as to what's going on in the world. So a lot of people sort of ask, what in the world is going on? And I just flew back this afternoon, about 3 hours ago from France in Germany. And it was my 58th flight this year. Next week I go to Washington, D.C. and the following week LA. And interestingly, I don't have a job. So I'll speak a little bit about what I think is also going to happen. But as I do travel all over the world, and I work with lots of different companies, including Jim's company, GCP, I happen to be lucky enough to be an advisor to. I get to see different types of companies, small, large, big, global. And so one of the questions people ask me is, can you make sense of what is going on in the world? And I try to do that by saying there are 5 things we need to keep in mind. And I'm eventually going to give you, there are no slides, but at the end of this, I'm going to give you an address where you can find everything I say in writing. Okay. So everything I'm going to tell you is available in writing. So there's a piece I wrote called the 5 tectonic shifts. So my first thing is what are the 5 big things going on in the world? I'm going to leave the one everyone's got top of mind at the very end. So I'm going to talk on the first one. And the first one that's going on in the world is everything you believe and its exact opposite is now true at the same time. Which is why I see a lot of senior management and companies struggle because they want a silver bullet answer. This is the way. like the Mandalorian. And it isn't that way. It's like Lawrence of Arabia. Nothing is written. What do I mean by that? Just look at this. Most countries in the world are a little concerned about globalization, and therefore a lot of them are starting to say we have to be in charge of our own supply chains. Part of it was COVID, part of it was whatever. So it's like the US says we need to build chips, we have to back Intel. Right? The Chinese say what they need to do, everybody does what they need to do. So you have this feeling that globalization is sort of receding. And at the very same time, for any of you who drive cars, the price of oil has been going up and down a bit because there's a little thing called the Strait of Hormuz, right? And in the US, we don't actually realize the impact of Strait of Hormuz. This is why I travel so much in the world. 20% of the world's oil goes to the Strait of Hormuz, but the US tends to basically be self-sufficient more or less in oil. But that's not true in most of the other parts of the world. 45% of the world's fertilizer goes to the Strait. So in my country of birth, I'm a US citizen, in my country of birth in India, they're planting very differently. It's planting season because they can't afford the fertilizer. So when people tell me there isn't globalization, I say, you must be kidding me, right? But is there less globalization? And is there more like multipolar localization? Sure. So you've got to basically have both those thoughts in the same mind. Today, there are 7 companies in the United States that will basically be spending the equivalent of about $850 billion on investments in AI. Amazon, AI, Anthropic, Meta. And so you would think scale is very important because without scale, you cannot compete. On the other hand, because of AI, the fastest growing and the most profitable companies in the world have very few employees. Right? So is scale important or is scale not important? So a lot of people say my strategy is scale, and others say my strategy is anti-scale. And the reality of it is, depending on what category you are in, both make sense. You just got to know where you are speaking from. If you want to compete with Amazon and you say you don't want scale, you're not going to win, right? But there are different ways of doing it. So these are what I call duality. So that's one of the tectonic shifts. And for a lot of senior people, they don't know how to get their minds around this. And I just say it's F. Scott Fitzgerald, right? Which is science through intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposite ideas in your mind and still function. That's what he said in the Frackout, which is his favorite, right? And so that's what is happening. The second one, which for some of the young people here, is I truly believe that jobs at work are uncoupling. And I believe that jobs are a silly phase that work is going through. So 150 years ago, not none of us, very few people had jobs. There were jobs, but very few people had jobs 150 years ago. We all had work. We had work for years and years and years. But what happened is because of everything from mass manufacturing, electricity, etc., you began to have jobs. Well, next year in the United States, more people will be freelance than will have full-time jobs. Right? Globally, 68% of the people who earn an income do not have a job. For the last 7 years, after having a very senior job, in a 100,000 person company, in the last 7 years, I've not had a job. I've had work. And I believe that jobs and work are uncoupling. And in the United States, we reached peak full-time jobs in 2025. We will never have as many full-time jobs in the US in 2025, and no one is telling people to shoot. But remember what I just said, peak full-time jobs. I did not say peak work, peak income, peak opportunity, or even peak part-time jobs. Okay, it said peak full-time jobs. And there's a lot of reasons for it, which is part of it is the third shift. And the third shift is what I basically call is demographic disruption. And I'm only going to focus on the US right now because that's where we are. Things are happening all over the world. But in the US, here's 3 key things that you all should be aware of. Starting this year or next year, the US population for the first time in its history is going to start going into decline. It has never gone into decline. Every business plan that I worked on always had population increase of 2% a year in the United States. That's poor. I'll explain to you why that's over. The reason that's over is it takes approximately 2.1 children per woman to keep the population the same. That number in the United States is 1.5. The reason 1.5 and 2.1 we still have the same population is something called legal and illegal immigration. If you cut out legal and illegal immigration, the US goes into rapid decline. If you cut out illegal immigration, the US goes into slow decline. Right? In people, well, that's fine, but that's just the facts. That's the way it works. That number, you want to see the future happening here. You can go to China, where it's 1.2, Japan 1.1, and Korea 0.8. So in Korea, you walk around, you barely see children. Nurseries are being closed down and replaced by dog and cat stores. Okay, that's sort of the reality, which is, so that's the first population shift. It's one of the reasons why I have full-time jobs. If you're people, you're not basically having as many full-time jobs. There's another reason. I see some of that in this room. I was looking at a mirror, I see the same thing. The United States is getting older. I don't call myself older, I call myself more seasoned. Okay, so I'm in a room with young people and seasoned people, right? And to give you an idea of that, it's the following. That the only group of people that is growing in the US is 55 plus. In fact, 11,000 people turn 65 every day. But what is particularly interesting is 70% of America's income, or wealth, not income, wealth, is held by people over 50 years old. And what you're now basically seeing is the United States is a supposedly young country, 250 years old. I just came back from Marseille, which is a city that was from 600 BC. That's 2,500 years old, right? You grew up in India, which is 5,000 years old. We're a young country which is growing old really fast. We're a young country where old people decide how the country works. You will never see Social Security or Medicare being touched, see everything else being touched. Just facts. I'm a math major. I'll give you the facts, not like all this beating. Here's what's actually happening. Right? That's why I go to boardrooms and I say, I don't care what you feel. I'm just going to tell you what is real. You can then decide to hate me for saying that, but that's what the facts are. Right? And so the facts are we're basically in a country which is aging, population is declining. And in a world where jobs and work are uncoupling, where the opposite of everything you think is true. And then the other one is there is a massive divide between young and old people in mindsets. The people like me, baby boomers, 66% of us believe in capitalism. 22% of Gen Z believe in capitalism. And the reason is because their basic belief is I'm finding it very hard to get a job, get a home, move ahead, explain to me how the system works. Right? And so to a great extent, I go to the boardroom and tell people the young people would like our money and power, but they don't want to grow up to be like us. They get actually paid to insult senior people as well. Okay. I just have a track record and I say it respectfully, I spend a little time before I get kicked out. Okay. But these are the real shifts that are going on. And then the last one is technology. What I'm trying to get people to understand is technology is not the only thing that's happening. Right? Work and jobs are uncoupling, populations are aging, globalization is changing, two minds are happening. That's the world we're living in. And people say, give me the one answer. So there is no one answer. The one answer is you're going to die. Nothing else going to give you an answer. Right? So in effect, that makes people actually think. So now I'm going to talk about AI, the fifth of the shifts. My second point is about AI. So There are 3 or 4 things I'll let you know about AI, including something else later on how to learn about this in a non-scary way. Okay. So the first thing to learn about, don't think about AI, and these are my perspectives. The first 5 are I have data and math. Here is now me providing you a perspective because nobody knows what the hell's going on. So we're making it all up, right? So I'm going to give you a perspective. The first is I don't think AI should be called artificial intelligence. I don't think AI should be called augmented intelligence. I think AI should be called something that Mustafa Suleiman, who works at Microsoft, once or twice said, and then somebody told him to shut up, so he never said it again. But I happen to have heard him say it. So I said, that's a good idea. I'm going to keep saying it. So I did not come up with this particular term. He did. He's gone quiet. I keep saying it. Okay? So I believe AI is alien intelligence. It's not human intelligence, but it's not a machine. Why is it not a machine? I'm not saying it's sentient. Why is it not a machine? What are the top 3 uses of AI in the United States among people? Forget about companies. You and I know what are the top 3 uses?
Therapy.
Therapy, right? Relationship management and search, particularly for medicine. Okay. So people are basically saying, here is my therapist, my doctor, and my dog. That is not a machine. This machine, I'm not saying it's alive. But that's not how people are dealing with it. 5 to 10% of people are in love with their chatty cheese and Tories and things like that. I mean, you may find it shocking. 40% of America is lonely. Someone's talking to you and saying you're cool. I like that too. Okay, and they talk to you. It talks to you. Okay. So that's why I call it alien intelligence. It's not human. It's not a machine. People are relating to it. They're having relationships with it. It's getting better and better and better. So the first thing is that. Now let's talk about better and better and better. So until now, the fastest and best rule of law capability increasing was Moore's law, where the capability of a processor doubled in its capacity every 18 months. When I wrote my second book, um, after I wrote it, 3, 4 months after it, Fidelity, the financial company, 500 of their senior management board folks and asked me to talk to them. And one of the questions they ask is, Rishad, it's been 5 months since your book came out, and because it's HarperCollins professionally published, it's probably 7 months since you touched it. What did you get wrong? And my answer was one thing. I got one thing wrong, which is I don't date anything, but the back of the book, I say, here's what's coming. In my mind, it was what's coming by 2029. I now believe that is 2027. Because what I didn't put, because the way I write books, I write it so that they don't get dated. So I don't put any like statistical figures because they get dated. But when I was writing my book, AI was doubling every 11 months. Well, most laws every 18 months. This whole agentic thing came on later. Right now, when my book came out, AI was doubling every 7 months. And now AI capability is doubling every 11 weeks. Anybody who knows math or compound interest, it's exponential. It's exponential, right? We've never seen anything like this, like ever before. The capabilities are so absolutely incredible. A colleague of mine, and I run a leadership project on Athena, like over the weekend, he basically sent me a deck on an analysis of P&G's diapers and on McDonald's. That was better than any deck I've read from any consulting company, and he did it by himself in approximately 6 hours using the latest tools from Core and OpenAI. Astonishing. I was sitting out there and saying, oh my, like, what was basically happening. And that is interesting. That's the first thing. Second, so if people think AI is underhyped, I think overhyped, I think it's under. People really don't know what's happening yet. That's number one. Number two, I don't believe that AI is like previous technologies because previous technologies that I've written and followed previous technologies have always basically done something that has increased the human mind. So what do I mean by that? We had fire. So when we had fire, we could cook our food, we ate meat, and our brains were. Then we had the wheel, and we could go to different places and different experiences. Then with the printing press, so we could share stories and stories for hundreds of years could come to us. I believe AI is the first time that we are having a new brain. There's another brain. It's not just a human brain. Everything else was a tool for the human brain. This is both a tool for a human brain that the people who really use it basically say this is a collaborator. I've never heard of any other tool being a collaborator. People say, the top people who use it say, this is my collaborator. Right? But the collaborator is learning really fast. So that's the second thing. So you think about this, a new human brain, think about alien intelligence. And the third and last thing is, so what the hell is going to save us if we need saving? I actually believe that humans are going to be okay because what's going to save us is our messiness. So machines make a decision between zeros and ones. I have two daughters who are grown up and living in Manhattan. And when either of them are in a different mood, they're more different than two different people. So I believe a human being in a different mood is different than two different people. Machines say yes or no. Human beings say, why are you asking me the question? The answer is maybe, could be, should be. Right? Because human beings are not actually computing machines. My first book, which was very successful, was called Destroying the Soul of Business. And it came out long before AI. It was called Stay Human in the Age of Data. And what I basically sort of discovered is that the most successful people marry story and spreadsheet. So Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, said, we choose with our hearts and we use numbers to justify what we just did. And if that wasn't true, none of us would wear expensive watches, drive expensive cars, have expensive homes, because none of that computes on a mathematical basis. If you want to maximize, you want to basically maximize wealth, spend nothing, put it all in the stock market, and you die rich. That's the right thing if you compute. But that's not how people live. That's how a machine might go. Right? So my whole stuff is like, where are all the people when everybody's discussing this, which I find very interesting. The people who are most AI forward thinking, like Elon Musk and Ariel, etc., they seem to be also the least human. I'm not saying they're amazingly capable people, but they just seem to not compute on a human scale. I don't think a sunset moves Elon Musk at all, right? He's brilliant. He's got more intelligence in his finger than all of us in this room has, right? But so it's going to be very interesting. So what will save us is that humanity, because in effect, what's going to basically happen is we're going to say that's done by a machine. I want something like human. It's the difference of basically buying something from a Chinese factory or a rubber-based bag. The same fabric, same thing, but it's all this provenance and design and storytelling. Right? The reason is because humans are stories. And our life, we're stories. Joe Didion's basically said we tell ourselves stories to live. So in effect, I believe the future is AI plus HI. I'm big on AI, it's HI. The HI is not human intelligence. That's dead. Like I tell people, I was always told if you want to learn stuff, surround yourself in a room smarter than you, people smarter than you. Any of you all, if you're sitting in the bathroom with your phone and you've got ChatGPT or Claude on it, you've got someone, you're in a room with someone smarter. So that's people. It's human intuition, human interaction, human imagination, human inventiveness. those are the things, and those marrying the two will be very important. And pro AI and pro HI, it's those two. So I'll leave with this, or this AI section, with one thought about how you all can learn about this. And you don't need to be very expert, but let's say you're not expert. People will try to scare the Jesus out of you, there's nothing to get scared of. Okay. What you need is a little budget. And since you're a members of this club, I think you can afford a little budget. Okay. So I propose that you should spend between $20 and $60 a month. You all can more, but 20 to 60 should be enough. You pay for a premium version of either Claude or ChatGPT. And if you want, also pay an extra version for Gemini. And for those who want some thrills and thrills, you can do Grok. I do all four. Okay. But basically, if you do Claude and OpenAI, because a lot of the Gemini stuff is not being made free through Google. But if you got $60, I pay for those three. And if you're into art and stuff like that, I pay $20 to Midjourney. And if you know $20 to like Adobe Firefly, and you got $100, and you got everything you need. It's about $100. Now sometimes you come across things. One of my daughters who's a filmmaker, she started using it, so I underwrite her payment and she uses mine. So she had $120 left, which is sort of interesting. But I'll give you why you need to do that. The free versions are only half as good, if that, as the paid versions. You have no idea what you're using in the free version. The paid version is really the one that you want to use. Free version will blow your mind. The paid version is what you want. I don't make any money from any of these companies, but the whole idea basically is I put aside like a $1,200 to $1,500 a year budget, play around with these things. At a minimum, you need to have a $240 a year budget. One of these. And if you do only one, depending on your orientation, it will be probably Claude or AI. You can get a lot of free stuff from Gemini. So it's not, but pay for the version. Next, you say, how do I need to use it? It's all this thing about the gen take this, that. Don't even worry about that. This is how you start. Okay? I'm not trying to be grim, but this is how you start. You start by basically saying, will you please write an obituary? So I tried that because someone gave me this thing, and my daughters who both used my thing called me immediately and said, Dad, is something wrong? I said, no. I said, the CEO of the company, so that's a good question to ask. Okay. And then you start moving from there. Or if you're in any particular interest, right? Whether it's gay or songs or golf, start interacting with it, asking questions. And you will basically realize that you've come across someone who's an expert in that field better than you would ever know. But it doesn't have to be about work and a gen thing. It's whatever you're passionate about. Whatever you're passionate about, the only thing that doesn't work yet is porn, but everything else works. Okay, but the whole idea basically is whatever you're passionate about, literature. I know the next speaker is the one from now is going to be about Napoleon. You can go deep dive and spend weeks on Napoleon, which is absolutely extraordinary. Now I go in, like yesterday, I like French food, but I said, okay, enough of this. I grew up in India, so I said, some spicy Thai food. So I went and looked, I went to my ChatGPT and said, so give me, what's a little bit of fat? They gave me such a fantastic analysis compared to what anybody else did. That I discovered the best restaurant in that place, which I couldn't do under normal circumstances. So whatever it does, instead of going to Google search, instead of asking somebody, start interrogating these things. And you'll begin to understand both its strengths, and if it's in your field or the expertise of your area, you'll also get to understand its weaknesses, like what you add, to it. So that is broadly big shifts, including AI. Work and jobs uncoupling is a very big thing. And for the young people in the room, I've written a lot about how to prepare for the future of work. So I believe you'll never graduate. The news is you'll always have to learn, because almost all knowledge half-life is going to decay really fast, which is number one. And the other is, even if you're working in a large company, you have to think of yourself as a company of one. So what do I mean by company of one? one of the reasons I was successful in transitioning from being one of the five most senior people in a 105,000 person company in being a pathetic one person per company who doesn't like his boss doesn't like his employee. Like, okay, I have no executive assistant. I do all my own stuff. Pretty pathetic. Okay. But I've kept my exact income exactly the same. I go to exactly the same senior meetings. And nobody cares that I don't work for a 106,000 person company. Many of my colleagues, nobody will call them because they don't have the budgets of their clients. They don't have any, nobody calls it anymore. They still call me. And that's because I figured out what you had to do was when you were working in a large company, you had to say, why would someone call me if I don't have the company's brand name or the budget? So you must prepare for that. That's what most people don't prepare for. Right. So I always tell a lot of my, this chief marketing officers, oh, we're so amazing. I said, no one's calling you. They're calling you, you gotta have a budget. You don't have your budget, no one's going to call you. Can you please build some skill sets that are yours, that are actually portable, that you can take with you, right? And so a company of one is to build a skill set or skills that you can, like a reputation, so somebody needs to know you and be highly collaborative. We're living in a plug and play world. So if you help other people, people will help you. None of these people on LinkedIn say any of this. It's all nonsense. Like my whole stuff is like it's stupid people talking to stupid people with algorithms voting the stupidity. Right? That's not the way the world works. But if you actually want to look for it, you can find everything. So when people say, how do I learn? I learn from the people I go visit and talk to, obviously. But I also learn because the AI plus the internet, YouTube, podcasts, Substacks, teach you a whole bunch of stuff. So my whole thing is if you want to learn and get better, it's never before. So I'm going to end right now and open up a question, which is just a time, with a couple of thoughts on when someone basically told me, if you were young, what would you do now? And I basically said, I am young. Let me tell you what I am doing. Right. And so my belief is until you're like 100% dead, you're young. And then when you're 100% dead, who the hell knows what happens then? Okay. But until then, you're young. And often people will tell me, like, what are you doing this for? I said, look, people tell me I'm too old for this. I said, look, I'm on Medicare already, deep into Medicare, and I'm still doing this. Stop. Okay. So I basically believe the day you stop learning is the day you stop dying. Right. So that's basically it. I'm not talking about learning to make money and learning to impress people, but the day you stop learning is the day you stop dying. The good news is if you live because of all the horrible things that happen in life or good things, you keep learning. But there are other ways also of learning, which is sort of, sort of interesting. And so towards that, I basically have written a lot about how to upgrade your mental operating system. So your phone your phone is in its 18th operating system in the last 18 years. How many times have we upgraded our mental operating system? So I have this trick on how to upgrade your mental operating system because people say, like, how come you know what you know? And I said, because I work at it. How do you think I do it? Right? It doesn't come like some. So here's what I suggest that people do. All three you'll find interesting. The third one is not a political statement, but some may find this a political statement. I'm not making any political statement. So the first one is starting tomorrow, allocate an hour a day to learn. So take an hour from your calendar, take it from anywhere but your family and sleep, because most people don't spend enough time in those two areas. Take it from work, because the reality of it is companies don't get better people. So when my company is transforming, I said, that's bullshit. No companies transform. That's like moving things around. People transform. People upgrade themselves. Right? If I can unleash the people, that's how the company changes. So the whole idea of spending an hour every day is to upgrade a mental operating system. And I would do that. Now these days I spend more than an hour because I'm slow. Also don't have a job. But basically, spend an hour a day. And you can do anything you want. And one of these AI things asking you something. Learn about Napoleon. Doesn't matter. It could be anything. And the whole idea is to get in that learning mindset versus anything else. The second is once in a while, but not all the time, build a case to the exact opposite of what you think is true. So if you believe in a particular point of view, I'd like you to try to build a case for why the exact opposite point of view is correct. And if you can't, how do you know your point of view is correct? So when I was at Publicis, all our acquisitions were made when I went to the board and gave them two decks. One was for the acquisition and one was against the acquisition. And nobody could tell what I was recommending because both the decks were equally good. And when they were not good, we never did it. When they were equally good, we thought about it. Right? Because if you don't know the other side, how the hell do you know anything? Right? Which is, and you can have all kinds of interesting conversations. You can learn that in an interesting way. So I was coming back today from the airport after landing from France, and my driver, I quickly figured out, my cab driver, had just returned from Tehran in January. So I said, tell me about yourself. He said, I've been living in the US for 30 years. My grandmother can't come here, so I've got to go to Tehran. I said, tell me what's going on in Tehran. Right? It's a very interesting perspective, and I learned things. I mean, and he was like, he's an American guy, so he's not like some crazy person. And so what I always basically say is, if I believe this, why don't I go and talk to somebody who believes the exact opposite? I'm not talking about science. So if somebody says they don't believe in gravity, don't try that. And there are a lot of things where we don't build the opposite case, and then stuff, and then starts preaching. Makes sense? So you build the opposite case, it makes sense. And in today's world, it is a very big thing because the competition, the opportunities and threats for any business and category or person will come from outside where they're looking. Very much like all the automobile companies in the US, who shocked them? It wasn't, GM wasn't shocked by Ford, wasn't shocked by Toyota, wasn't shocked by BMW. They were shocked by Uber and Tesla and Waymo. I was in Germany, see what's happening in Germany. They won't actually do this, but Volkswagen may get rid of 100,000 jobs. Because you go to China and the cars are there. 60% of the cars in China, 60% of the world's electric cars are now made in China. And so to a great extent, their cars are there. So you just like, what does it matter? But their cars are there. Okay. And their solar cells are better. And so it's a very interesting thing if you actually look from a different perspective. And my last thing I would end with is this, and this is not a political statement. People say, how should I learn to think? So I said, this is what you should learn how to think. So I grew up in India, and in India, we were forced to learn Shakespeare. Okay? And I mean, forced to learn means like we could memorize the guy. Okay, which is very interesting. So over the years, I began to realize and appreciate Shakespeare, who probably, with the exception of religious books, is the most formidable writer the world has ever had. Right? 500 years ago. And interestingly, 500 years ago, my two favorite books were written 500 years ago, same week. One in Spain and one in England. One was the ultimate novel, and it's Don Quixote. And one, I think, is the ultimate play, but people think there are other ultimate plays, which is Hamlet. Okay. So those are my two favorite. So what is Don Quixote about? Don Quixote is about lots of things. It's actually about the injustice of death. That's what it is. That's high, right? What the hell is Hamlet about? It can be a lot of other things. But one of the things it's about is the undiscovered country called death. That's what it's to be or not to be. Right? That's what that is about. It's about hesitation and a whole bunch of other things, but it's about that. So I've taken this undiscovered country and wrote a talk about it, which became a very popular talk. So I'll show you where you can read it. And I was sitting in a place where there were 150 or 200 people who were private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, so advertising economic thing. And my job was to basically open and close the conference and listen to everybody and then encapsulate what happened, force me to pay attention. So I know, right? So I did the opening, and then the first day I did the closing. And this is what everybody has said, but I said one of the things that all of you are asking is, So all investment is basically a bet on the future. Right? So you're betting on the future. So I said, we're all trying to figure out the future. So how do we succeed in the future? So I said, the undiscovered country called death we're all going to, but there's also another undiscovered country we're all going to, which is tomorrow. Tomorrow is an undiscovered country. So who are the people who do really well in undiscovered countries? Can we learn from them? And say, let's take that learning and put it to ourselves. So I wrote a piece called Think Like an Immigrant. Right? And I told people in that room, I say think like an immigrant. If you'll feel better, I'll say think like a vegan, right? Okay. Because we're all immigrating into the future. So what is that? What do immigrants think like? They think like outsiders. We think like outsiders. I'm even though I've been here for 45 years. So we always think like outsiders. If you're my first kid, I said, what the hell? Grocery store, never seen that. What's this? Right? Everything is I think like an outsider. The options and threats trading category will come from the outside. They'll never come from a boardroom. As I tell senior people, you're hanging out with other senior people. That's incestuous thinking. You won't get surprised by each other. You'll get surprised by someone you don't get. So that's one. Second is what else do immigrants do? They think like underdogs. In a world of technology, AI technology is the slingshot that's going to allow David or Daniel to bring down Goliath. When somebody tells me they got a castle with a moat around it, that's only what I think. You got a castle, I got a source of water with which I will flood you out. Right? That's the interesting thought. The other one is what else do immigrants do? It's I think like outsiders and think like underdogs. Immigrants will take a lot of short-term pain for long-term gain. In a world of change today, companies have to invest in the future. If you're focusing on quarterly earnings, you'll never make it to the future. And this with this going on. So that was actually very popular. So the insurance whole thing like an immigrant, but I don't get any royalties for it. But I'll leave you with that. But I think the world is I'm very optimistic about the future because AI plus HI. I'm also very optimistic because when I see the young people as well as senior people, all of us can do a whole bunch of stuff. I also believe that if you forget for a second, a couple of things here and there, would you rather be alive today than 30 years ago? And my basic belief is regardless of who you are, woman, African American, whatever, it's better off in the United States today than 30 years ago for anybody, including, by the way, if you love culture, you can access it all over the place. If you have cancer, you got one pass, right? So I always tell people, I'm not scared of anything but headlines. Thank you. Exactly.
So when you're talking about AI, I'm just kind of curious. You can a little bit about why it seems like you think that AI may not be able to actually learn like human emotion. It seems like that's the next horizon. And
Yeah, so the reason I'm not saying it won't be able to do this. Some people like Yuval Harari say it's going to happen, right? But my basic belief is it tends to basically use other stuff that's done and then put it together. And the best things you've ever read gives you a feeling that makes you feel something. It's not an analysis thing, right? Whether it's reading a poem, reading something, reading a speech, it's a feeling. And the feeling tends to be the most when you've never seen it before. It's completely new, completely random. And that can happen. Like remember the chess game that was moved 37 and it did. But I don't think it's going to happen as much. So I think like if I show you today the best that it writes, the best that it does, it's very high E level. Right? It may get, I think, to an A minus level, like we'll never get to an A plus level. And never is going to be right. It's going to be harder. The other is the humans are not keeping sleep. And I, who write, my first book, I did not use any AI. In my second book, it doesn't have a line of AI, but I use AI to help me write the book. So in the future, I'm going to be using the technologies. It isn't that the humans are going to be like, oh, God, we don't have it. So humans are going to keep using the AI technology to also get better. So AI plus HI will be with the thing which I truly believe. So the AI plus HI will be AI. That's my belief. And my example is Deep Blue, the computer. The Deep Blue, the computer, when it beat, it beat Kasparov. When people don't realize it beat Kasparov, but afterwards Kasparov said, "Can I use Deep Blue too?" And Kasparov plus Deep Blue always beat Deep Blue, right? So I think at the highest level, it is very possible, just like it's very possible that people who in the 1800s wrote better than a machine in the 1800s may have written better than someone, you know, 5,000 years ago. But at any state of the art, I think it'll be AI plus HR. But it requires us to understand and embrace AI versus thinking that it's either the enemy or it doesn't work. So it's neither the enemy nor does it not work. It's very powerful, but we can use it for our own, sort of purposes.
I'm curious, when you mentioned the paid chat or Claude or these are all large language models. Are they eliminating some of the queries and only going to the best queries from the paid version or what?
So it's basically what they're basically doing is the more refined the model, the more compute it uses, so there's more costs. So what tends to basically happen is the most recent version of Core, their Fable. I think they've extended maybe to the 17th, so the next 3-4 days. But after that, even if you are a Claude like $125 user, to use Fable in its agentic mode, I'm going to have to actually pay for the tokens. Because what is tending to basically happen is while the prices of tokens are coming down significantly, right now, the cost of the companies giving us the AI capability is far greater than the revenue. So think about Uber in its early days, how cheap it was relative to taxis. Now it's very much more expensive than taxis. In fact, to such an extent that when you see the taxi, you get the taxi choice of the Uber app and you can see what the price differences are. Right? So the thing is, what they're basically doing is they're giving you the crap for free so they can sell you the cocaine. Which is good.
So I'd love your perspective on this. We use AI in our family every day. And so 10 months ago in AI terms, this was 100 years ago, Lake Forest College had a speaker who this is his business, is living in Silicon Valley, talking with the leaders. And he said that their cocktail conversation is, what's your P-Doom number? And that the goal for these tech people is to create the AI God. And they don't care about humanity. It's who's going to make that God. And they all are building these $150, $200 million bunkers. So that's very heavy information to hold while we see the incredible benefits of AI. So with your knowledge and expertise, what is, first of all, an AI God? What does that mean to us? And two, is that still the circumstance?
So in almost all of these cases, what I would say is that and its opposite is true. Yes, I've read that. There are a lot of people who work for Anthropic who don't save for 401k because you would think they don't save for 401k because they've got an Anthropic stock, so they don't have to save for anything, right? But part of the reason they claim. So my stuff is you're asking Anthropic people when they put 401k. Obviously, they've got 401k, that each one of them is a millionaire. They're there for a minute, right? But they claim it's because the world is coming to an end, so they don't have to save for 401k. I mean, that's some of the key things. So there's obviously this, and there are the highest percentage I've seen, which is still a very high percentage, is 10%. But there's something completely wrong. And people say 50-50, but like 10%. But if you've got on a plane and someone says that 10% chance it's going to crash, you can get on the plane, right? So it's this thing. But I'm looking at the other stuff. In fact, I recently talked to a bunch of people who said, "Can you help us think about why there's such an anti-AI thing?" And I said, the reason it's an anti-AI is a business marketer. So I said, all you're telling me is how this is going to like ruin my life. And you haven't given me a reason why it hasn't. The people who actually are the spokesmen are not human beings, right? It's basically, obviously Dario is a great guy. I mean, I don't know any of them. Okay, I'm just using their name like I do, but Dario and Sam Altman and Elon Musk, they're all fantastic. Clearly, what they've achieved is what they can do. But I do not want to have to link with that. Like, I mean, they're like useless people as a human being, at this first one I can tell. They are the spokespeople who go around basically say half the jobs are going to be destroyed. Right? People basically say my electricity prices are going up. These people are saying my electricity prices are going up. They look at the companies with the biggest. There's some question whether AI will add jobs or subtract jobs. I think AI will in the end add jobs, but in the short term, may subtract jobs faster than it adds jobs. That's a different thing, right? But what it is doing is in the tech companies, and not for AI, but for reasons that they did other things, like they overhired, they're laying off people like crazy. If you look at where the big layoffs are happening at Microsoft and Amazon, right? Now it's really because they overhired, they did a whole bunch of stuff during COVID, but they claim it's AI that's doing it. So if you actually are looking around and say, there is this thing that I don't understand that's going to kill me, not allow my kids to have jobs, take my jobs away, and I'm supposed to like it. Right. So I give you the positive end. If you haven't seen enough of, but here's a positive end of it. Let me you know. Yes. So one of the worst cancers to have is pancreatic cancer. Very few people survive that 5 years down. AI now has figured out a way to identify that you're going to have pancreatic cancer. This is a Mayo Clinic thing, 3 years before anything else. So, in effect, it's possible that pancreatic cancer will be solved. If that makes sense. Okay. Today, 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, GitHub, which is Microsoft's thing for where people write code, etc., there used to be about 30 to 50 million people who used to use it. Almost all of them came from the Western world. Today, 1 billion people use it. 70% comes from Asia and Africa. So what people don't realize is this technology is going to be great for humanity in a very broad way. But it's also going to have some sort of prices. So it's a long way of saying I don't know, but I'm following sort of like a middle path. Is there a risk? There is a risk. But I also don't believe it's stoppable. And I'll tell you why I don't believe it's stoppable. It's because of there was a period of time where the Chinese government figured out that I knew more about media than most people knew of. So they hired my company to have me go to China 4 times a year to talk to different media companies. And I became a profit line item. I wish I had received the money. They paid the company, I would go there. And I went to 22 cities over the course of 4 years, 22 different cities. The media companies there are publicly traded companies, but everybody who runs it, because the media company, are members of the Communist Party, and senior members of the Communist Party. And after I would speak, about changes in media, changes in landscape, we should be looking at, we would always have a actor. And I, at that particular stage, which is why I'm very good with beer, is I basically said I was allergic to wine. Not true. Spent a lot of time in France. Okay, allergic to wine. And the reason I was allergic to wine, but I'm not allergic to beer. So I'm a good person. Is because what you would do is you would basically at the buffet you would basically sit down with like someone would come up and they would toast you, and you had to bottoms up. And there would be at least 15 people who would toast you, 10 to not 15, maybe 8 to 10 people would toast you. So you would have to basically bottom up like this much of wine or this much of beer. This ended up being over the course of a dinner, heavy dinner, this ended up being 3 bottles of beer. Or it could be a bottle and a half of wine. So I was intact as much as I could keep. Everybody else was like completely shit faced. Okay. And that's how I began to understand China in a very strange way. And this is my understanding of China, which is amazingly correct. And it's turning out to be even more true now than ever before. So we would sit around and say, hey, Rishad, you come from India, I come from China. I say, yeah. We have great civilizations, yeah. Indians and Chinese fight with each other, they don't like each other. But anyway, so the whole idea is yes, yes, okay. So then I say, what do you think went wrong in China between, 1900 and 1990? Okay. Um, you would not hear anything about communism, none of that. Everyone had one answer. And it wasn't like they'd been trained on this answer. This was the answer. And the answer was we fell behind in technology. Gunpowder, steamships, industrial engines, etc. Our job is to never ever fall behind in technology. Technology is number one. So as a result, one of the key things, China and the United States are in a big AI war. And no one is going to stop either country from competing because the country that decides that we're going to control stuff loses. And so that's a very strange way of saying we can't stop it. We just hope that our minds.
What do you think about the collision between AI and human?
It's a very big thing. So remember this whole idea about underdogs. The thing that you would never have thought about is that Russia is fighting a war longer than World War II with a country it was supposed to destroy in 48 hours, which now is likely going to make, it's already made it have to import diesel. Right? So, in fact, the key, and this is the biggest challenge, I always come back to this. Next week, I'm doing two big presentations, virtually though, with two very large companies, their senior management. So I wrote something, there's a piece I'll show you, it was called The Coming Organizational Meltdown. So my whole basic belief is companies don't have a technology problem, they have a human problem. And I keep thinking it's a technology problem. I think your organizations all suck. I tell them, you don't even know what you're doing, not even organized right. All this about technology is really about politics and power and people. You keep thinking it's about technology. It's not about that, right? So what is basically happening in this particular sort of world? I think the biggest trick, the biggest challenge that we're going to basically have is that the organizations, whether it's AI or technology, war technology, drone technology, and everything else, all the technology is going to increasingly be run by machines. They're not going to basically have puts like the world's worst thing is to go fight on the ground, right? And the other thing that's a positive side, it's a very weird positive side. We might actually come faster to the end of war, not the end of war, but less war than ever before. So Steve Pinkerton, a thinker of this book, where he says things are actually getting better. I just think about the fact that the two supposedly greatest powers, or two of the three greatest powers in the world, started a war. Russia and the United States. Are they winning it? Russia isn't. And with everything I know outside of Fox, because the US isn't either. Right? So my whole stuff is because with AI and other technology, it's asymmetrical warfare. I wrote something called asymmetrical warfare. It's this whole idea of you got a castle, I got a moat. And you think it's a boat, but I got a source of water. So in effect, what's going to basically happen, people don't realize the US has not won a war ever since Vietnam, it's World War II, Korea. Okay, but they keep fighting and they keep losing. Right? Russia keeps fighting and keeps losing. So my said the Chinese have figured out what the hell is this shit. Right? It makes absolutely no sense. And I think that's the very interesting thing that in this particular thing, where all of us are going to be like armed to the teeth, it might also be like, we can have nuclear weapons. It's going to be possible to beat people. So now, of course, the new thing that everyone is doing is cyber and drone warfare. It's almost all technological. And there are these companies that I'm sure you're aware of, whether it's Palantir or Andural and others, you should sort of read about them. It's a completely new thing. So the thing with AI is because it's this new human, this new brain, is impacting every industry. It's medicine, teaching, education, pretty much everything.
See, that is a bad. So AI runs on energy and compute. So that's kind of the oil of the recession. So what do you think? Is it nuclear or what do you think is happening with, because with no energy, whether it's nuclear, oil, electricity, whatever, there is no AI. Where
Yes.
is gas coming from?
So, so right now, if you look at China and the United States, the United States has 75% of the world's AI computed. China has 15%, the rest of the world is 10. When it comes down to energy, China has 3 times the energy of the United States. So one of the things that the Chinese are starting to do, and comes specifically to energy, is right now in the US, the energy is a lot, but the price of tokens keep coming down. But the thing is, because we have more and more needs for it, these engines get bigger, so the energy things go. But one, the cost has gone to such an extent that ostensibly all the solar stuff like SpaceX, all of that might be another area. And the other one is to change the models so they don't become as heavy. So today, the US leads in the frontier models, Claude's or the OpenAI's, but the Chinese lead in the open source models, the open weight open source models, and they tend to be much, much cheaper. The thing that I'm looking out for is the US better also go to open source models, because otherwise what's going to happen is the US is going to have AI for the US and the rest of the world is going to have Chinese AI. Right? Because the AI is just cheaper. And what is tending to basically happen is increasingly with also what happened recently with Fable, like, yes, you can have it, yes, you can't have it. So I always tell people, do me a favor, like I always tell the people in the U who are all over the world who are like anti-American, I said, listen, clowns, if your borders were dissolved, all of you would end up in America. Right? You'd either end up in America, Australia, or Scandinavia, nowhere else. So don't keep yelling. Right? This is stupid people, right? But on the other hand, for the Americans, I say go sit around with these people and see what's going on. So I always say go spend some time in China, spend some time in Israel, spend some time in different places. You get a very interesting perspective. So I think one of the reason the two things I'm very bullish about. I'm very bullish that history has always proven that as technology has got better, people have tended to get better. Like things have been, like we're talking about mankind or humankind or person kind. Any individual might be, up or down on that. The second is some of the people who are less seasoned. Okay, I'm a big fan of this generation of young people all over the world. They are not lazy. They are not self-involved. All the stuff that everybody says about, of course, a couple of them are like that, and some of us are like that. But my basic belief is there's an entire group of people who are coming out who are AI leaders, who are coming out with some amazing skill sets. So I always think like optimistic. And the reason I eventually always tell people to be optimistic, even if you have to give yourself a drink or two to be optimistic, it's supposed to be depressing or whatever. But the whole idea is the reason is nobody follows a pessimistic person. Right? You don't want to hang around with somebody who says the world is coming to an end. After a while, for 15, 20 minutes, if you think it's, you can converse around. But at some stages, what's the point? If the whole thing is coming to an end, what's the point? Right? But it isn't the point. But if you actually look, it's sort of like moving ahead. So I actually basically believe in something which are two very odd things. So I believe in markets, I believe in individuals, I believe in science. Right? The three. So I bet on individual rights. I believe in markets. I mean, whatever, and I believe in science. Those are the three things I've learned over time actually make sense. The rest of it comes in most. Okay. So let's look at science, because right? Science is about to have the most amazing breakthroughs over the next 10, 15 years, like no one has ever seen before. And the reason life gets better is because of science. You should still think about it. But none of the AI people are talking about that. They're talking about data centers, world's coming to an end. They are building the bunkers. They're not funding their 401ks, right? And people say, like, what's that? But at some particular stage, misery loves company, but it isn't a good company to be in. Everyone can shut it.
I'd like to point out, is it nuclear is one of the answers? And
yes, nuclear is part of the answer.
in the US, so adequate.
It is very adequate. It is, which is one of the reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, so it is, so what has happened is that China, what they did is they have some nuclear, they have hydro, and they've got solar. And obviously the way they did hydro, with it was the Three River Gorges Dam, etc. It's not exactly humanistically nice, okay, with what they basically did. But they basically have sort of rectified. They're not saying China model is the right model. But basically, I think that eventually what people have to sort of recognize is markets work, but people have to coordinate for the long term. So you need to have some like longer time coordination. The only thing that China does well, they do lots of things badly, they also do lots of things well. The one thing that they've tended to do better than the US, as far as I can tell, are two things. A real investment in education. A real investment in education, right? It's not just an Asian thing. It's like the Chinese or but the real investment. Hey, look, you gotta like educate people, and the education is in science. If you see their TikTok versus our TikTok, it's a completely different TikTok. Our TikTok is how to be an influencer. Their TikTok is how to be an astronaut. Literally, right? So the idea is that the whole thing is it's a great deal of sort of investment, which is one. The second is yes, it does interfere with a lot of other things. Their basic belief is let's think in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30-year horizons and not 6-month horizons. Right? So they can make certain sort of decisions. So in addition to the fact that, with China, literally that China is all about making sure they win in technology, there's another thing on China, which I discovered.
We've reached the end of our
Right.
session. We can keep asking questions.
Yeah, so I'll leave you with this last thing, right? Which is called by CIA map. And this is, I'm really simplifying 3 great civilizations into like 3 lines. And I've been a lot to one, I grew up in one, I've lived in one. So China, India, America, which I think. So even at Publicis, I wrote our whole strategy on China, India, America. It wasn't just technology. I said, these are the 3 places we need to win. Don't worry about France. It's quite interesting. Okay. So China, India, America. So America, again, really simplifying this. America's brilliance is it eventually is about the individual. India's brilliance is it's eventually about the family. If someone gets a job in India, their parents go for first day. Okay. In China, the emphasis is the country. The individual family doesn't matter, it's China. So I'd rather be an individual family oriented than China, but that's what they do. And thank you for your time. I'll give you one address quickly if you write this down. It's Rishah. It's just my first name, but I'll also send to you. So it's Rishad.substack.com. Yeah, so it's my first name.substack.com. So I write every week. So I have about 35,000 people who read me every Sunday. And all these pieces are all available for free. No ads, no subscription, no additionals, nothing. So it's Rishad.substack.com. And it's all completely free, which is kind of something interesting. Thank you again for the opportunity.
I have a question that's a lot of topics covered. It's very hard to do in 45 minutes. How you see you every day. A lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly how many episodes. Yeah. But this is still. About it, but it's a big issue. Life is also in this first one. Most of us. Very good. It's like. That's the most important. Right. But so we say the change. What is? I don't know why. So fast.
That's the thing, but it's just there, but it's wrong, so everything was not done.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, the dangerous thing, so the go down, but you're so screwed.
Yeah.
Nothing will. That's where it's scary, it's very.
Yes, challenge.
Trying to, they laugh at me when I say, can I get this car in the emergency center?
Yep. Say yours. For sure. Rishad knocks up.
Thank you, Rishad.
Yeah, I did, right? Jenny, actually, I've got 2 boards there. So, my kids are at property, yeah, but you did, yeah, right. So, how would I get my title?
Which story right now?
My first name at gmail.com, just show. Fascinating, you cover too many things to talk about one time, like population decline plus AI is gonna offset, that's why I thought, yeah, I would. And we set up right, yeah, I thought, you just instituted me, so we read it in that column. Yeah, that's so there. What did I do? No, that's 6 hours ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's good. So really, see, I thought and I guess what happens is the people I was scared. Yeah, right. And before they tell me what's there, all of this situation blocks the whole thing was like why you making so instead. My truck actually says he's not a good body, but speak like that. I know you're great.
But he did racing.
Okay, so
Special. I guess they need to have about market, yeah. So if everything we talked about, it's really, people look at the region wants to stay government, stopping the brand new existing run things and don't understand. So she was planning to, she went to find so funny that probably knows she really strong. He's a longer than just great for us trust. Remember, he voice diet, or what do you think? There's a really a diet. Well, he was really on the show in there. What was actually true is kind of true.
So it's a hard question, but I'll give you what I do, which is that I can do it because the way I grew up. Like a lot of people. There's a great article in the latest Atlantic which I talked about. It's our story is what's called the death of media.
Because it takes, if you have, it take about 40 minutes to read.
Right.
Yeah. It's too.
But I want to have obviously been reading so what I've done is when people say I can really do that in 1 hour. So
That was a good idea.
so
Learning.
yeah, so what I do is that I don't call it 1 hour, yeah, 1 hour. These are actually real books.
Yes.
Okay, and what I do is actually to be really strange. I mean, 20 minutes of 3 books, and I actually have 21 books that I read, and I don't like last week I didn't read anything. I was with my wife and reading all kinds of stuff. So I like it. I take it like you I think we're not reading books, but what basically happens is I go and I read books, and so what I've discovered is by reading books across subjects, across time, and then early in the morning, it helps me actually ask questions and think. And I do it very analog, like right now. Things. Everything else I do is electronic. So my magazine dies so till like 10 plus 600 up. but I basically do that, and that's one. The other thing that I do is I travel a lot. And part of traveling is I go out of my way to look for people who have really different perspectives, right? Because you can get yourself into a bubble. Yeah. So I work myself out thing, and also because of what I do to people, part of what I'm asked to do is provoke people in a respectful way. So I have to know what I'm provoking. Right? So it forces me to say, oh shit, they're actually right. Like, you know, like, so you have to agree with you go ahead and think that I have I don't care who you are, so I shouldn't really care here. And right. And so usually people say that you understood the point of view. I said, yeah, I'm not saying the point of view is wrong, but I understand different areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I want sure that you.
Do you need me? We're gonna have dinner. Right? Yes.
Okay, got it.
But I'm gonna show that you know about that.
Yeah, I think you have my nice thoughts too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for being.
Of course.
So,
That's really getting about.
Well, yeah.
Other than the third one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.